My father-in-law told me I'd never be good enough for his daughter. I made him eat those words publicly. Richard Thornhill stood at the microphone during my wedding reception and told 300 guests that I was marrying above my station. Those were his exact words. He said his daughter deserved someone with a real career, not a struggling teacher who barely made $38,000 a year. He said Claire had been raised with certain expectations, and he doubted I could provide the life she deserved. Then he sat down while half the room stared at their plates in uncomfortable silence, and the other half pretended they hadn't heard anything wrong. My new wife squeezed my hand under the table, her face red with humiliation and rage. I smiled and raised my glass, pretending the wealthiest man in our county hadn't just told everyone I was worthless. That was 5 years ago, and I'd been swallowing his insults ever since, letting him believe he was right about me. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed when I discovered what he'd been doing behind my back. Now I had proof of things that would destroy his reputation forever, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. I'd been teaching high school English in Riverside, Pennsylvania for 6 years when I met Claire at a community fundraiser. She was volunteering at the book sale table, wearing jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked nothing like the daughter of the man who owned half the commercial real estate in 3 counties. We talked about Steinbeck and Morrison for 20 minutes before she asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. I said yes, without knowing her last name was Thornhill, without understanding that her father would see me as an obstacle to whatever arranged marriage he'd planned for his only child. Our first date lasted 6 hours. The second date, Richard showed up at the restaurant where we were having dinner, claiming it was a coincidence, even though Claire later told me he'd never eaten there before in his life. He looked at my 10-year-old Subaru in the parking lot and asked what I did for a living. When I said I taught English at Riverside High, his expression shifted from suspicious to openly dismissive. Richard made his position clear from the beginning. During our third dinner together at Claire's apartment, he stopped by unannounced and found me cooking pasta in her kitchen. He asked how much my salary was, right there in front of his daughter, like I was applying for a loan. When I told him teachers in our district made between $35,000 and $55,000 depending on experience, he actually laughed. He said he paid his groundskeeper more than that and couldn't imagine how I expected to support a family. Claire told him to leave, her voice shaking with anger. After he left, she apologized for 2 hours, explaining that her father had always been controlling and judgmental, that he'd driven away every boyfriend she'd ever had with exactly this kind of behavior. She said if I couldn't handle her father's attitude, she'd understand. I told her I wasn't going anywhere because I loved her, not her father's opinion of me. That was the truth then, and it stayed true through everything that came after. Richard escalated his campaign against me over the next year. He offered me money to break up with Claire, starting at $10,000 and eventually reaching $50,000, like I was some kind of mercenary who could be bought off. When I refused every offer, he tried a different approach. He started inviting Claire to family events and specifically told her not to bring me. He scheduled important family dinners on nights he knew I had school commitments. He bought her a new BMW and told her she should be with someone who could afford to buy her nice things without his help. At Claire's birthday dinner, he seated me at the far end of the table away from her next to her cousin's husband, who spent the entire meal telling me about his successful investment banking career. The message was clear. This is what success looks like, and you're not it. I ate my steak and smiled and pretended not to notice the performance, but my hands were clenched under the table hard enough that my nails left marks in my palms. When I proposed to Claire after 18 months together, Richard demanded a meeting at his office downtown. His building was all glass and steel, with his name on a bronze plaque in the lobby. His secretary led me to a conference room on the 20th floor, where Richard sat behind a massive desk with a view of the entire city. He didn't offer me a seat. He told me that if I insisted on marrying his daughter, I needed to sign a prenuptial agreement that would protect his family's assets from my inevitable failure. He said it with complete confidence, like my failure was a documented fact rather than his bitter prediction. The prenup his lawyer presented was 38 pages long and contained clauses that would leave me with nothing if the marriage ended, regardless of circumstances or fault. I read every page while Richard watched me with satisfaction, probably expecting me to argue or storm out, and that's when things took a turn I never expected. To see the full story, click the link below or go on my channel.